This is Connections Radio. It's nice to have you along with us today. I'm Glenn Tomset. Now, as we all know, the pandemic has got us all thinking about how we tackle the future, especially in a work capacity. A lot is now out there when it comes to helping others change direction. Let's talk to Keith Howells. Now, Keith runs something called Project4 Learning Lab, which assists organisations accelerate their speed of learning and helps others throughout their delivery of transformational change. Keith, nice to have you on the line. How do we find you today?
Oh, fantastic, Glenn. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Great. Nice to be talking to you. So then, Project4 Learning Lab, is it what it says on the label? You help others accelerate their speed of learning. How do you do that exactly?
Yeah, it is what it says on the label. For some, it's quite an abstract thing, but we view learning as something that's experiential and gained through doing. Many think of us as, well, maybe you're a training organization then. But no, we focus on helping organizations do different things. And speed of learning is particularly important given everything we've experienced in the world at the moment. So we work with organizations to help them fundamentally scan their environment, use data-driven decisions, and we help them make faster, better decisions. And our hypothesis in doing that is if they're able to make faster, better decisions, then that will reflect in better organizational performance.
So how do you do this then with an organization? They want to speed up the way they do things. Is it a question of you going in? Do you give them like a free, almost analysis session, and then you work from there? How does it work physically? How do you sort of get into a company's mindset, if you like?
We do exactly that. So we do a fairly detailed, what we would call diagnostic, and it's really just getting to know each other and understanding the challenges that the organization faces. Most organizations that engage us have some tangible reason or catalyst for doing so. So there's often something at the top of their mind that they want to address. And we go and understand what that is and what it is that they want to achieve. We talk to a cross-section of people in the organization to get different perspectives on how things are, how it feels to work there. And then we start to look at their processes, their systems, how they work, their sort of rituals and routines, and start to really pinpoint what some of the challenges really are, and then what some of the solutions might be to address those.
And has that changed since the pandemic kicked in? I mean, we're getting back to normal now. Life is, as they all tell us, slowly returning to some sort of normality. Are companies changing the way they do things now? Are they streamlining their operations more?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? They're definitely changing how they operate. And I think there's some really interesting reflections on that as well. You know, the COVID situation has been a catalyst for change in every organization, an overnight rapid change. Our experience from talking with lots of people is that has been just a question of survival. You know, the organizations have a choice. Do they continue or do they not? And given the choice to continue, that necessitated change. I mean, even from the most obvious perspective of now we're working at home or we're working remotely and we can't collaborate face-to-face anymore. So that introduces all kinds of challenges, but opportunities in terms of how teams engage with each other and how they might introduce a different way of working that may readdress some work-life balance issues.
And is it a question, Keith, of making people or helping people realize their vision, their goal? They can't quite see it, and you sort of make that a little bit more visible for them.
Absolutely. So we sort of start with, it's not always an organization's challenge, but it can be. So we would start with what is their overall goal? And if they can't describe it, we would help them articulate it. And many organizations can articulate where they want to get to, but they struggle with actually making it happen. And given clarity on the goal and direction of travel, we work with organizations to drive alignment and engagement across the organization. So what we really want to achieve is that everyone is aligned to the goals of the organization and they understand what it is they need to achieve, and they know that when they're doing their job today, what they're doing right now today is going to further the goals of the organization.
Because they can see the vision, they can see the goal, but they can't quite reach it. I mean,
exactly. That we see that quite a lot. And with smaller organizations, it's the challenges are different. It's relatively easy to see the goal, and it's relatively easy to mobilize a small number of people in a given direction. as organizations get bigger, people become misaligned. People don't fully understand the vision. Some people might understand it, others might not. It might be miscommunicated. It might not be communicated frequently enough. You get all kinds of opportunities for people to diverge, but all feel like they're doing the right thing for the organization. And we try to distill it down into one question when we go into organizations, and that's, how do you know you've had a good day?
And what do they normally come back with?
Well, yeah, it wasn't bad. It was pretty,
it was okay.
Yeah, it was all right. Yeah, it's fairly standard.
Yeah. So what do you want them to say? What are you wanting them to say?
We're wanting them to say, I had a great day at work. I was super engaged. I felt like I had the freedom and autonomy to do what I did best. And I achieved this thing. And this thing that I achieved is really important to me personally. And it's really important to the organization for this reason. And doing this helps us achieve that. And most people's working day isn't like that at all.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm lucky that I love what I do for a living. So I'm lucky. I can see my goals. I know I've got to get a certain bit of audio done, or I've got to get an interview done. So, I'm quite lucky in that respect. But so many people, it's a drudge, isn't it, going to work? They don't really enjoy it. They're doing it because they've got to pay the bills. And they don't see that sort of goal, that light at the end of the tunnel, do they?
That's right. And many organizations and many management practices come from more than 100 years ago, actually. This idea that work from the Industrial Revolution, actually, work is mechanistic. You can describe what it is. You can break it down into small chunks. You can allocate that to individuals, and then you can measure and monitor their output against what should happen. And then you can reward them financially or penalize them financially and in some instances relieve them of their duties. And the economy's not like that these days. The majority of economic activity in the country is from services or knowledge-driven businesses. And you can't break the work content down. The environment is moving really quickly. Knowledge workers aren't motivated by extrinsic rewards. There's a fantastic TED talk by a guy called Dan Pink that's been viewed like millions and millions of times. And he talks about what motivates knowledge workers, and he breaks it down into mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So, mastery, I'm trained and have the capability to be really excellent at what it is I do. Autonomy, I have the space to exercise my discretion and work the way that I feel will get the best out of me. And a sense of purpose, I know why I'm doing the work I'm doing, and I value that work. So I value the purpose and the mission. I'm aligned with the goals of the organization, and they're consistent with what I feel and what I value.
You've got a great line on your website here, and I just want to bring this out. Our mission is to excite our clients. That's a great line.
Thanks, Glenn. We've sort of challenged ourselves, actually, to say, well, in the products and services that we deliver, do they excite us? Because if they don't excite us, then there's very little chance they're going to excite our clients. And so we're sort of continually testing ourselves now as to, is this good? Are we excited by this? Will this get us out of bed in the morning? And how does this really work? Lots of businesses like ours, over time, can gravitate towards fairly sterile models, and they can end up telling businesses how things should be but aren't. And sometimes they don't test the solutions that they prescribe. We're sort of at the stage where we really want to test all of these things and get excited by them and understand what works and what doesn't, and then we can change those things.
How do you deal with a company then that comes to you? They've been doing the same thing year after year. Their results are poor. They want some sort of improvement. That must be a challenge, because there are so many older companies, older organizations out there run by the older folk, if you like, who can't see change. They don't want to change, but it gets to a point where results are poor and they've got to change. I mean, how on earth do you convince them to do something like this?
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's sort of our experience is that organizations that stagnate and don't change, it's always a problem of leadership. And often with organizations, it's those leaders that are coming and asking for something different. And the solution almost always manifests itself as them needing to change their behavior.
So that's got to be a challenge in itself, isn't it? For you?
for me and for them. So there's fortunately sort of our understanding of neuroscience has developed and what it takes to change behaviors. And we sort of apply a number of techniques to do that. And just as an example, no one ever changed their behavior because someone else told them that they needed to. It's just never going to happen.
It doesn't happen.
But we're quite social animals. We're wired to feel safety as part of a group, and therefore we're heavily influenced by the groups that we're in. And sometimes what that means is we can fail to differentiate between what we know as individuals and what the group knows and believes to be true. And if we want people to change, the first thing that we have to do is help them see that what they say and do and believe isn't necessarily true. So rather than us saying, you need to change and this is how you need to change, what we'll do is create the conditions where they see that they don't know what it is they think they know, which sounds a bit abstract, but it's kind of, let's challenge your worldview of how things work.
Right.
Because without that, there's no catalyst for change. There's no reason to change.
Sure. And when you go into an organization, a company, be it small, medium or large, you've got to get buy-in from everybody, haven't you, on this?
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to what you said earlier. People convince themselves that they have to work, and they have to work in this organization because they need to pay their bills and make a living. And that's just a sign of disengagement in an organization. That's conditioned behavior associated with coming to work many days in succession and getting the same thing. And when people are faced with an alternative to that, and they start to feel like maybe they have a contribution to make, maybe someone's listening to them, maybe they start to understand other people around them and what motivates them and what they want to achieve, and maybe they start talking with each other about how they might collaborate, things start to change. So our experience is if we start our engagements quite from a performance perspective, the results aren't great, these things need to change, how have you let it get to that state? That sort of leads people into defensive behavior. When we start from no one knows more about this business and how it works than you do. What is it that really doesn't work? What is it that you would love to see happen? What part do you think you might play in that? When we start from a valuing people and their contribution and genuinely listening to what it is they have to say, it absolutely changes engagement levels.
And we've all got it in us to change, haven't we? We've just got to accept that change.
Absolutely. But we need a stimulus to do it. Everyone likes change as long as they don't have to change.
Yeah.
And I think we all need a reason to change, and it needs to be our reason. So we need to connect people with that. And if you ask people, would you love to come into the office and love what you do and work with people that you really enjoy working with and deliver great stuff every day? And by the way, you can be paid for this. They'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, where do I sign up?
Presumably with your learning, Keith, you've got various package years. I mean, typically, how long does the process take? Is it an ongoing learning process? You don't just go into an organization and over a couple of days, change their way of thinking. This is an ongoing process, isn't it?
Exactly. The change that we seek to help people make is in how they work and interact, not necessarily in terms of what they do, their products, their services. It's more about how they deliver those or how they develop those. And behavior change needs repetitious practice. So, for us to develop new or different ways of acting, we need to practice those things, because at the start they feel unnatural because our brain is wired to do different things. So we've got to develop new pathways in the brain, which comes from focused, repetitious practice. So we work with businesses when we help them with their change journey. The duration is as long as the number of repetitions, if you know what I mean. So if a business had monthly management meetings, and that was the main way in which they sort of aligned, engaged the organization and made course corrections, then it would take quite a long time for us to engender any change in that, because it would need lots of repetitions, and therefore you'd be into many, many months. What we do with organizations is we break down those traditional longer management cycles into much shorter cycles. So we might break monthly management meetings down into daily meetings or twice a week or 3 times a week. And that then gives participants the opportunity to practice with different things and change in much smaller chunks and get much faster feedback. And if we can have those really small, short intervals, then we can engender change much faster. And more importantly, the organization can learn much faster, because I think, just thinking about COVID and what happened, we had this sort of almost overnight change that completely changed what businesses needed to do to keep operating. And that was forced from the external environment. And many businesses have found that some of the changes they've introduced, they've really benefited from, but it took some extraordinary event for them to change. They could elect to change. And I think part of the key is to take some of those lessons from this external event, build them into the way of operating inside the organization, and then continually scan both the external environment, what's happening outside the organization, and how are we doing inside the organization. Scan those at very short intervals and make very small course corrections at very short intervals. And then businesses start to find those corrections and changes they need to make aren't quite so big, and therefore they're easier to make, and therefore they get benefit quicker, and therefore they're more incentivized to introduce more change. And you sort of can get into quite a virtuous circle. Whereas if change takes a long time and is hard to implement, what we're basically doing is we're training leaders not to change. And that's not good for anyone.
It's fascinating. And there's a lot of psychology in this, isn't there? You've got to get to know somebody pretty quickly in the way they operate. I mean, you've got to get inside their head almost, haven't you? I mean, there's a lot of psychology involved in what you do when you go into a company. And how do you deal with that, though? It's great on a face-to-face basis, but a lot of what you do at the moment, I'm guessing, has been remote. How on earth do you get into somebody's mind on a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever? That must be tricky.
It's been the biggest change that we've faced. And to be honest, last February, at the start of the sort of pandemic, I had no idea how it was going to work out.
Yeah.
I was scared.
How has it worked out for you?
It's worked out surprisingly well, actually. Working over virtual meetings and being able to see people's faces and being able to talk with them. I wouldn't say it's face-to-face, but it's surprising how you can engender a close working relationship quickly and develop trust. And I think the other interesting side of that is that most people have been in on those meetings from their home environment, or they've been outside the normal workspace. So they haven't been in that environment that's mutually reinforcing. Lots of organizations, they are the way they are because of the sum of all the interactions and all the things that people say and do every day that sort of makes it how it is. What we've seen is taking people outside that organization context sort of gives them a little chance to reflect as well. And the technology today is really, really, really good for developing personal connections. And just as an example of that, I was speaking with a colleague yesterday and said it's just amazing. Sort of at the start of this year, I started working with a team in Australia to coach them to deliver change in their part of the organization, and delivering change through delivering training programs and then coaching programs off the back of that. And so I was working with them to help them understand the construct of the training program and how things are laid out and how they need to deliver it and what the coaching is, et cetera, et cetera. And over the course of 4 months working with this team in Australia, we had such an awesome working relationship.
Brilliant.
They're people I've never met and probably never will. And last week, they finished their coaching program of a team based in Japan. So not only did they have to learn new content and deliver it, they had to deliver it through interpreters remotely. And they've managed to do that and engender quite significant transformational change in that part of their organization. And yesterday, it just hit me that, my goodness, they're on the other side of the world. We'll never meet. They've delivered one of the most complex transformational programs, and it's made a difference to another part of that organization who's in a different country and speaks a different language.
Wow.
And you think, wow, wow, technology can do that.
Yeah.
Plus mindset.
That must make you feel pretty good, I should think.
It does. It does. It absolutely does. But it's not often I or we as humans reflect on success either. So that's sort of one of the things that we've started to work quite hard on with our clients is it's really easy in businesses to focus on the problems and the challenges.
That's so true, and not acknowledge the success. That's so true.
Yeah, and we don't see how far we've come often. And it's so important to do that.
Okay. So some great products and services, just looking at a few of them on your website here: leadership training and development, lean agile consulting, workshop facilitation, coaching, individual and team evaluation, and public speaking.
Yeah, and we're just about to refine our website actually to adapt and evolve some of our products off the learning from the pandemic. So we're looking at more remote solutions, and we're super interested in breaking change down into bite-sized chunks. So we're working really hard at the moment to take our learning programs, which before the pandemic have been long and immersive because they needed to be that to develop behavior change, or so we thought. And we're going to break those down into really small bite-sized chunks so that people can consume training and learning in the course of their daily work, which I think will be transformational. And we're looking to do the same with some of our coaching support as well, much smaller bite-sized chunks to help people with what they need, when they need it, where they need it, rather than taking them outside work and talking about how things should be.
Well, I think it's a great service, really interesting to talk to you. If anybody wants more details about what you do and how perhaps you can help them, Keith, give us your details. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can read more on the website, www.p4learninglab.com. They can find us on LinkedIn and contact us through there, post through LinkedIn, or they can contact me directly, and that's khowells@p4learninglab.com. And we'd be delighted to hear from them.
Great. Good to talk to you, Keith. Keith Howells, who runs Project4 Learning Lab, assisting organizations accelerate the speed of learning and help leaders throughout their delivery of transformational change, and lots of that going on at the moment. Keith, thank you so much for being with us on Connections Radio today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, Glenn. Thank you very much for having me.